Okay, good morning, evening to everyone. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by the Metastasis.Research Society, Academia versus Industry, Finding the Right Career Path. My name is Lenka Kiacová, and together with Sandra Scherer,
hello everybody,
we will be hosting today's session. We are both ambassadors of the Early Career Leadership Council of the Metastatic.Research Society. And before we start with the webinar, Sandra will tell you more about our activities.
So the MRS is an international professional society since 1984, and we are a registered nonprofit based in the US, and our mission is to support research on processes which are fundamental to metastasis. Our main goal here is to provide a platform supporting the exchange of information between researchers, clinicians, industry, and patients worldwide. We aim to accomplish that by running international conferences which are related to metastasis research, by generating awareness for the need of more metastasis research funding, and by promoting the career development of young investigators through various activities such as this webinar and also other initiatives by our Early Career Leadership Council. And your membership fees support all these efforts, and in return you get, our members receive exclusive benefits listed on this slide. So please visit our website at metastasis-research.org where you can join us today. And here you can also find a link to our upcoming meetings. This year we have our conference with the EACR in November, and registration for this is open now. Next year there will be our biennial congress, including a Young Investigator Satellite meeting.
Thank you, Sandra. And before I go further, I want to review the functionality of GoToWebinar. So your active participation is important throughout the session. Right now, you are muted to avoid background noises during the webinar. However, throughout the presentation, you can submit your questions and comments through the chat box, which you can find on the control panel. It is important that you send your questions directly to Sandra Scherer, who is co-organizer of this session. Sandra will collect them and address them to Dr. Kirkin during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. The whole webinar is recorded and later will be posted for the convenience of MRS members at our website. So again, please submit your questions to Sandra Scherer directly. And now I'm very excited that I can welcome Dr. Vladimir Kirkin, a team leader of the Cancer Therapeutic Unit at the Institute of Cancer Research, London, UK. Dr. Kirkin obtained his PhD from the University of Karlsruhe, Germany, where he was studying compounds that inhibit tumor cell proliferation, angiogenesis, and lymph-angiogenesis. Between years 2001 and 2008, he proceeded with his career pursuing 2 postdocs in Frankfurt, Germany, with a research focus on apoptosis and autophagy. In 2008, he made a transition to the industry. He became a lab head of in vivo pharmacology unit and later a global research and development project manager in Merck, a leading biotechnology company based in Germany. He has worked for almost a decade in the pharmaceutical industry and contributed to the discovery and early clinical development of a number of anti-cancer drug candidates. Dr. Kirkin has therefore a great understanding of both working environments and a great appreciation of what it takes to become a successful leading figure in the industry company. And for those who just joining us, welcome. Don't forget to submit questions directly to Sandra Scherer, the co-organizer of this webinar, via the chat box. And now we are looking forward to your talk, Dr. Kirkin.
Hello.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So I can start. Just a moment. So I hope my screen can be seen by the participants. So I would like to start by thanking very much, of course, the organizers, Lenka and Sandra, and also the chair of the Early Career Leadership Council, Thomas Cox. So I would like to spend the next 40 minutes roughly talking about the career. I think this format is very interesting because I cannot see your eyes, I cannot hear your voices, but I can appreciate that in this audience there is certain interest to work towards possibly industrial careers, possibly to develop academic careers. So this talk is exactly about the choice between academia and industry, and I would like to start with showing. So first of all, we don't have to go into my career details. It's just been introduced. So I'm presently team leader in the Institute of Cancer Research, London, and I have worked in both academia and industry. And this path is really sometimes can be very surprising. So I hope you appreciate that from the presentation. So let me start by just highlighting the features of an academic career. So today I'm speaking from position of a team leader, group leader, faculty role in academia. I don't know, your level, probably it's PhD, postdoc, maybe some junior group leaders who are interested in industrial careers. So what are the main features of the academic career? So obviously, all of us are interested to publish high-quality research. Then, for many of us as well, one of the biggest achievements is the achievement of tenure, which gives flexibility and independence for many of our faculty members. So this independence is highlighted here. So once you move up of this pyramid, you start as a student, postdoc, group leader, professor, then maybe director of an institute, and your imagination here is the limit. The decision making, of course, also increases. So the power of your decisions will increase, and so your lever on the work you're doing. And of course, the salary is another point that concerns everyone on this earth. So it's clear. Then I listed on the right-hand side some additional things that are features of the academic environment. So collaboration and networking, of course, are very important. Funding, we all write grants, contribute to the grants written by group leaders, and we're very happy to get funded. Another feature is you have to be able to provide certain services, especially at later, more senior positions. You have to be able to teach or maybe sit in different committees. And then finally, you would like to present your data, you go out to conferences, you publish your results, and this is a very important part of the research academic career. If we look at the industrial career, you can also start with being a student, so it's not that rare nowadays that PhD students are starting in industry. You can also do postdoc in industry, and then you can progress in different ways, but in this pyramid you can see a research path. So the next level could be lab head, so I used to be a lab head. You can be a group leader, a director, and many other titles. You can progress even further to be a department head and then member of executive boards. So all these, in comparison to academia, where you are mostly concerned with some breakthrough results and usually it's basic science and then applied science, in industry clearly it's either service or a drug or a therapy for the community, for the patients, and then of course you have profit in mind. So looking at this environment in industry, you have to bring a certain level of responsibility, which also grows with this pyramid. You need to possess significant project management skills at all the levels of this career path. You need to be able to work with employees and manage teams. So this is a little bit different from academic environment sometimes. And the decision making, again, raises the flexibility, the freedom to make decisions, and the power in the decision making will increase with your role in the company. The salary is called compensation very often in industry, and it's also a very big motivator for many career decisions. Like I mentioned for academia, often collaboration and networking is of course very important. Personal flexibility is probably a factor which is not that very much requested in academia, where you are asked to do really high-intensity research on one particular topic for maybe for 10, 20 years sometimes. The initiative of career, you have to really take your own career in your hands and then build your career actively in industry, and there are so many opportunities out there. You have a chance to really dive into business and commercial aspects of things, which can be very exciting but also be distracting if you're thinking about science as the dream of your life. Communicating ideas and results are equally important in an industry. Sometimes it's a little bit different angle than conferencing, but we can come to that later. So what is the research and development in industry? So what is so different from academia? In this one slide, I summarize the progression of a drug from idea to the market, which usually takes 15 years and will consume whatever money you can imagine, and in euros there is one scale on the screen. So usually you start, or I would rather start, you have research and development, partitioning of this pipeline, and also commercial. So in the research, usually you do discovery and preclinical evaluation of compounds. Whenever you start working with patients and you start clinical development, it's called development. It's just semantics. And commercialization starts in later phases of drug development, so later clinical phases, and then happens, of course, once the drug is on the market, you have a lot of commercial activities. So the discovery usually starts with a concept. So imagine you're a student who came into industry and you have a bright idea. You propose that idea to the management and they ask you, can you please bring us evidence that this idea is really feasible? So you engage in target validation activities. I don't have time to go right now into many details of that. In principle, it's experimental validation using siRNA, CRISPR technology nowadays, using small molecules, tool compounds. You want to demonstrate that your disease depends on the target, or the pathway depends on the target, and the modulation of this target will have a certain effect on key parameters of the disease, on hallmarks of the disease. So it can take a whole PhD thesis with target validation, and in the next step, so several years past, you start with the screening phase. So HD in this scheme, I'm not sure you can see my arrow, but I can also circle around that. So HD is hit discovery phase. It usually takes about a year when an assay is developed to screen against a library of compounds. And then once you are out of that screen, you can rank the compounds under using certain criteria. It could be intellectual property. If you are free to develop this compound further on, you have to see 15 years horizon for your work. The feasibility of this of development, all this goes into the hit discovery phase. In the hit optimization phase, you already select several series of compounds, or if you're talking about biologics, could be antibodies, you can also work with those. You look for the best binders. There are keywords such as SAR, structure activity relationship. You would like to demonstrate that your compound is active in vitro, in cellular assays, beyond biochemical assays, which are usually starting points for your drug campaigns. Selectivity against other targets, early ADMET properties. So ADMET stands for absorption, distribution, metabolism, excretion, and toxicity, as well as FIS chemical properties, for example, solubility, cellular permeability, and others. So these, once you are successful in these activities and you optimize your hit compounds, you end up with compounds which you believe will work in animals. and this is when the lead optimization, LO phase, starts. And then you can already call yourself preclinical kind of research development area. You have already limited a series of compounds which work in animals, and you then optimize using multiple iterative activities. You optimize these ADMET parameters again to make sure you have really long enough half-life in the animals. You can retrieve your compound, for example, in tumor, if we're talking about cancer research, we're today in the metastasis community. You are concerned also as a chemist how to scale up the production of the compound. Is it manageable to supply later on in the clinics? You work with the formulation people trying to find the most optimal way to deliver the compound in the animal and then later in patients. And of course also you're concerned about intellectual property, IP. So you patent usually, in this, you start with lead optimization, patenting your compounds and securing the unique position on the market later on. So in the ED, which is exploratory development, sometimes this phase is together with lead optimization. You do pilot toxicology studies, so limited time frame, limited amount of animals. You test a compound with very high doses. You see what would be the side effects. Using regular doses, which would be also given in the clinics, you also profile safety of the compounds and different systems of organs. And then again, you are talking about supply of the compound. The compound should also have a different shelf life, so you measure stability of the compound just being stored. So to move on, in the phase 0, you are concerned with the pivotal tox. So starting here, all the experiments you've done flow into the dossier, which FDA, EMA, these agencies who control authorization of drugs for the markets, they will check all your data for consistency, for quality, and it's a very critical step to really start collecting high quality data. We have lots of management around that in companies. So pivotal talks will be 1 month talks, 3 month talks, and it can be longer to ensure that you really spot side effects in animals before you go into the patients. Also, you are predicting your first dose, which you will start in humans. In the phase 1, you're probably familiar with this concept that you start with limited number of patients, and then the major parameters that you control, that you check in the patients would be pharmacokinetics, so how the compound behaves in the body. Also safety and tolerability, what are the early signals for toxicity, and you would like to eliminate. So you would like usually to keep the dose before the dose-limiting toxicities come up. Recommended phase 2 dose, RP2D. So you suggest after these studies your dose for the big cohorts of patients, which will be in the phase 2. Phase 2 would be already in the, so if phase 1 is 20 patients, let's say, phase 2 could be 200 patients, and phase 3 could be 2,000 patients. And in each step, you have certain parameters which would allow you to progress the compound. So you end this brief overview of the R&D activities with registration. So all the dossier is submitted to, as I already mentioned, FDA, EMA in Europe, and other countries have their organizations. And you make sure that the compound meets the strict criteria, it outbids competition, and so on and so forth. So why I wanted to present this slide, it's very important because the jobs and career opportunities are all clustered around this pipeline. You can see it's complex. You have 15 years sometimes of drug development, and of course you need thousands of jobs to make sure this is all success. So there are several types of companies, however you want to classify those. I put here 3 types. So pharma companies like Merck, where I spent 9 years of my life, they are concerned with activities sometimes from ideation till as far as the market, and of course all post-market activities. Other companies such as biotechs, startups, they don't have enough money to progress compounds beyond very early development phases, or they're specialized on certain orphan compounds with very limited numbers of patients. So these companies offer very often also good studying opportunities for careers. They're more like universities sometimes. And also have generic drug manufacturers that occupy very late stages so that they feed on the patents of other companies that expire or close to expire, and they make sure that patients have a broader choice by manufacturing and marketing drugs which already became generic. And it's a very important, of course, also role in industry and in market. So I just listed here a few buzzwords. So research and development, which can be associated with different professions. Information services and technology, of course, you have IT specialists who work in pharmaceutical business. Manufacturing and supply, so you can be a chemist or engineer, plan manufacturing plants, and you can still call yourself being pharma employee. Business development, you can come from any industry where you need business development and join pharma business to make success. Commercial strategy, quality assurance, you would like, of course, to have high quality in everything you do in industry. Project management, this profession is required in many different industries, building industries, car industries, but also pharma business about 10 years ago introduced project management as core activity, and I was also a project manager in the past. I can give you some examples in this presentation. Clinical research, you have plenty of clinicians, doctors who decided to quit their daily practice with patients and spend time with drug development as consultants or members of teams of drug developers. Regulatory affairs, people who communicate with FDA, other agencies, and make sure that the information, all the requirements are passed on to the teams who develop the drugs. Human resources, and many others. So this scheme demonstrates the maze of opportunities you have in industry. So if academic careers could be more linear, you can imagine that if you enter industry, it's like coming to a new city. You have plenty of opportunities, you have to really look around, and it takes some years to get oriented, but once you are there, usually you can really see clear career paths. So one example, you can come as a laboratory head. On the next slides, I will give you more specification about each role, but just trust me for the word. So lab head is the one who directs certain small activities in a small lab or large lab. However, after 10 years, you can find yourself working as a regulatory head. So overviewing a team of people who screen regulatory documents and make sure that the drugs are developed up to the standards. You can be a clinical lead, even if you're not medical MD. I've seen such people in the company. You can be project manager and end your career in this job if you like structured approach and you don't care about scientific topics. You just want to manage certain scientific activities in a proper way. You can end up also as lab head. Don't be surprised. Sometimes some people spend 40 years as laboratory heads and they become experts in what they do. You can be also a commercial person, or you can end up as the CEO of a big company. And I've met such people who started at Merck as laboratory heads in chemistry and ended up as executive board members who are almost CEOs. So be optimistic, work for yourself, and you can achieve a lot. So a few words on the teams. So R&D teams, they don't look like academic groups. They're completely different, actually. So usually you can imagine classical academic group. You would have a PI, principal investigator, who would hire postdoctoral scientists, PhD students, other students, technicians, and all of us would then work on 1, 2, and up to 10 projects, whatever you want. And in that capacity, your main goal, of course, is to publish, as I introduced earlier. The project team in industry is completely different. It's a matrix. You borrow people as a project leader. So in the hub of this wheel, you have a project leader who can be come in from different areas, and then they borrow specialists from different departments, from different fields. And these specialists, they are not usually bench scientists. They are, again, small leaders in their own fields, and they work with bench scientists who supply data. So in this matrix organization, there is sometimes high fluidity, there is explosive nature of discussions, so you don't really have exactly the same way of work or life as in academia. So to go into the examples, first, again, let me reiterate what I just said about the group leader. So this is the model role for many of us who are in academia. You have junior group leader, you have senior group leaders, and you can really be all your life a group leader and do excellent work. And not everyone becomes Francis and Crick, who are illustrated on this picture. So they obviously are a paragon of successful academic careers. So we as group leaders in academia, and today I'm in that role again, we do have a team of postdocs, students, technical staff who work on a scientific problem. Our main objective is to develop and promote own research ideas. That's really key, that you have your original, you have own research, and you have some say in the field. You have to secure your own funding by writing grants, and you have to sometimes comply with teaching and other duties. You also work hard to obtain a permanent employment status. For many of us, this is the key parameter of success, key attribute of success. You also have to publish or perish. This is a famous phrase in academia. So here in the next 4 slides, I just give some examples of 4 different positions. Either I was in the roles, or I knew very closely people who were in the roles, and I had to actually decide, do I want to progress into those roles, or rather I would like to move into academia, as happened in the end. So I mentioned I was laboratory head at Merck in German Merck. So laboratory head means that you start with a small laboratory. You have several technicians who work together with you on a certain project. The projects are part of this matrix projects, which I mentioned before. So they're not like in academia, yours. So you have control maybe only of 10 or 20% of that project in the best case scenario. And of course, this project will be connected to drug discovery or drug development. So your role is to provide expertise to drug discovery and development projects. It means that you need to have really clear idea how drugs are discovered, developed, what other disciplines deliver. And you have to translate that knowledge into your team, because sometimes your technicians will be more experts in particular elements of what they're doing and not sit in the project meeting. So you have to be able to direct research in your lab and converting the messages from these matrix teams into work packages, as they called in industry. You lead this team of bench scientists, and you have to return the data which you retrieve. For example, you develop models for preclinical cancer research. So in very simple way, to save time, you have xenografts, and you would like to demonstrate that compounds which come out of the pipeline, they cause tumor regressions. So you receive 20 compounds from one project, 10 compounds from another project, 5 compounds from the third project. You have to profile these compounds using your models, and these models have to be tailored to the questions. For example, you would like to assess metastasis, and then you have your B16 model of metastasis. Once you evaluated these compounds, you create reports. It could be written reports, especially in later phases. You need to supply these reports into the dossiers. As well, you present data in forms of slides, and you discuss them with other disciplines, with chemists, with formulation people. How can we improve our models, because we see that the compound doesn't reach the tumor, doesn't hit the target. So all the things you discuss in the team and in the project teams. You have to constantly evaluate your specific area. For example, as a pharmacologist, you would like to evaluate new models. What about PDXs, patient-derived xenografts? You also try to recruit expertise from outside universities, contract research organizations, and try to improve the base of the research in the organization where you are a lab head. You also need to, so you're allowed to, and also you would like to propose and validate new therapeutic concepts. So you can read literature or do your small research in your free time and discover certain targets which you would like to play up into the existing pipelines and compete with 100 other ideas and concepts which are managed by the management. So if you've spent your time as a lab head and you are ready to move on, you can decide to go one step further, which is called a group leader or research director. So in that role, usually you have an oversight of research of several laboratories. You can imagine you used to be a lab head working with technical personnel, and as a group leader, you work, let's say, with 3 different laboratories, and you talk not to the technical personnel, but most of the time to the PhD level lab heads, who then deal with the individual projects. So you can have your own project as a group leader and maybe your own lab, but you have to also provide strategic leadership and guidance to lab heads and guide their own work. You need to mentor and develop these people. They would have different ideas about the development, and in the management position, you have to be really a good mentor and manager. So these are different things. You have to demonstrate accountability for the progress of a number of drug discovery and development projects. So you need to juggle early projects, late projects that are already in the clinics, and back translate knowledge from, it could be one program, for example, one drug in a pathway is already in phase 2, whereas very early concepts in the same pathway but another target is still in the hit discovery. So you need to overview that development activities and say, I would like to improve certain parameters. Maybe the next drug should not hit particular cytochromes in the liver and have a different metabolic profile because you have combination therapy where you interfere with a drug X, which is metabolized by the same CYP enzyme. So this could be your concept. Or you would like to develop an oral compound instead of IV, intravenous one. So group leader in that case is more of a free person, a little bit away from the bench, a little bit away from the research, and having more capacity to communicate with the management, with different teams. So it's one step in the management career. You can still pursue your own career, your own research if you are smart enough, if you have free time, especially by engaging in collaborations with universities. It's all possible. You have to report into a matrix structure, so you have a line manager, you have project teams, you have senior management, and all people need different information, so you need to prepare very often. Nearly every month you have reporting meetings where you have to analyze your data in a new way every time on a different angle. One day you would be asked about science, another day you would be asked about the commercial proposition. So different things. The next role which I took was project manager. So you can ask me why from lab head to project manager. So I had spent 5 years in the laboratory head position, and then decided to move on for several reasons. So one reason was because lab head in my organization was connected more to the early project. So I could see quite well how the drug discovery works, how compounds are triaged, and how do they progress from idea to the preclinical models, but what about the clinical development? What are the endpoints in the clinics? What are the critical parameters? How do you design a clinical strategy? So all these things I could not address in my position as a lab head. So when the opportunity arose, when my project, where I was previously a lab head, reached the clinical stage, it was quite natural for me to move on with the same project. I was assigned as a project manager. So my duties in that position were to design and maintain project plans. And these project plans, as I said, they're completely different from academic. You have to consider all the elements that I described before. For example, in phase 1, you would need formulation, you would need toxicology activities, supply, clinical activities. You need to organize patients. You need to organize even stays of patients in hospitals. All these things can be planned. There is a multi-layer management planning system as a project manager should have a good overview of. And it allows you to really build a nice overview of the whole R&D pipeline. It can be exciting, but it can also be quite boring if you consider managing budget, for example. You have to manage really high amounts in tens of millions of euros, pounds, dollars. Management means you have to plan different spendings and different activities, and sometimes it can be a little bit boring for a scientific mind. So you have to be cognizant about that. You have to track the progress of projects and report these project progress to senior management in different stakeholder meetings. You have to do risk management and other activities. So project manager is one role. I worked hand in hand with another person who was project or program lead. As I told you before, this is a lynch point in many drug discovery teams, drug discovery or drug development teams. And at each step you have a little bit different expertise required. So the program lead, this is a person who needs to be really a great project manager too, but it is a strategic manager. So this person, unlike the project manager, has a much more authority and has access to senior people who decide on the portfolio balance. You will be part of the decisions whether one particular program will be more important than the other one. It means money, of course, visibility, collaboration with other industrial partners or with universities, and you have really huge outreach. However, you're almost completely away from scientific work, so it's I cannot describe in 2 words, but it's a very senior role with huge responsibility and lots of traveling involved. This bright person on the slide is really a good illustration how these people feel once they become program leads. These people have to be experts in drug discovery, development, but also commercialization. This is a very important one. So many of them are also business people with degrees in business. Stakeholder management is an important thing, so you need to be really a good politician and feel people very, very well. You need to be able to motivate and develop people by example. You work only with PhD level scientists, with MD people, medical doctors, with business people, and it's all despite that you're not a direct boss. Okay, you also need to be able to manage huge funds. So a clinical phase 3 study can cost up to $500 million. So you have really huge responsibility. So I'm in the last quarter of the presentation now. I've described to you academia and industry. It was very, very quick. I know probably you got confused. But this is the framework we have to deal with today. There is a certain perceived gap between these 2 worlds. And this is part, I think, your attention to me today is probably the illustrates this gap. So Why I think this gap is quite significant. You can meet people who never see academia and they spend all their careers in industry, 20, 30, 40 years. And also, of course, you can find such people in academia who never see industry. And there are some people, I would probably be one of them, who connect academia and industry and do that as a hobbies. So the pluses, let's consider very briefly the pluses and minuses, pros and cons of academia and industry. So if you work in academia, you can count on some personal and research freedom, I don't know, especially at more senior levels. So if you're a professor, probably it's more true than a PhD student who has to complete the studies within a certain time frame. So also you have lots of visibility if you're successful. You have publications, people know about your work, you feel, so people need you. You have sometimes a good chunk of time for new things. You can start new, especially again in middle to senior roles, you have possibility to start really exciting new things. You can spread your ideas via teaching. I don't know, plus or minus. People would like to see it, so it's really personal view. On the negative side, you can argue that inadequate funding is really a pest or plague for the academia. The compromise on quality, sometimes you really need to cut corners. No money, no time, and you just do it once instead of 5 or 10 times. You have sometimes limited career choices. We discussed that in comparison to industry where you have thousands of jobs, academia is quite lean in the offer. Sometimes you can be also relatively isolated as a person. You can enjoy this, but for some of us it could be also a minus. In industry, the advantage, you can say, you feel yourself being part of the broader community who are dealing with health solutions. You are concerned with equality. Your work, unlike in academia, has to work 100% of times because you go into patients, and there is enough problem just with drugs failing to work because it's not hitting the right, so it hits the right target, but there is, let's say in cancer, resistance. So if you don't produce really good quality drug, you cannot be there. Then you can also enjoy connection to business. You can be in a large team, and of course you have huge opportunities in terms of career and reward, material reward. The minus would be sometimes reporting lines can be very confusing. It takes many years to learn those, and sometimes you can never learn because you have constant change in structures. Very often you would have lack of own research. You have to be extremely flexible and share people's ideas. You cannot spend time. You will not be given resource, time, money to do your own things, at least for a long time. You don't have very often peer review of your work, despite the quality which we mentioned. You don't test your ideas because of the intellectual property issues, and very seldom you publish. Only once you have a patent, and also fluidity in the organization. So how to improve, how to connect these two worlds together? I have here a program of several steps. So one step would be to improve quality standards in academia. I think if industry learns to trust academia, you would have no problem to work much closer. Don't have time to go into this. It's a Nature paper where they describe that many researchers agree with the statement that there is a reproducibility crisis. Also in industry, you hear anecdotes that at least 40% of academic research cannot be reproduced in industry. So there is mistrust, and this has to be improved, of course. So you need to do right statistics, you need to use validated tools, quality standards, you need to teach right attitude down the career ladder, and then there must be reproducibility incentives coming from journals and other bodies, and of course you need to work with the industry. On the other hand, if you want to have better chances after industry to go back to academia, you need to publish. So just one illustration from my side. I did publish quite a bit despite my role as a project manager. I had 2 primary and 4 review publications, and that allowed me to get back to academia relatively smoothly. The next step, you need, as a scientist in academia, to raise your self-awareness, understand what you want to achieve in life, and whether you really choose industry. So you can build these qualities in academia. You can start with PhD and even earlier. And there are very good examples of PhD students who are good at networking, good at seeing the big picture, and so on and so forth. So you need to raise that self-awareness. I think it would be important for industry, especially large farmers, to have more and more centers of academic excellence. So there are several examples, Novartis or Genentech, they have really good academic programs. So they spend lots of money on just academic research people can publish, and then they can recruit PhD students, postdocs, and improve the talent base of the company. On the other hand, it's okay. We just move on. So the last step is, of course, to have more organizations like my host institution, ICR, Institute of Cancer Research. So we have a drug discovery unit which works hand in hand with big pharma. So starting with phase 1, we usually would partner our assets and then share the risk, but also even just afford clinical development, which, as I mentioned to you, can cost you a fortune. So my last slides, I'm very aware of the time, which is close to the end. So if you work in academia and you would like to increase your chances to enter academia, so how to get more contacts with industry. So you can buy industrial attention by demonstrating technical know-how. Of course, if you have unique essays and unique biology, you can always, at conferences, approach certain companies. At open days in industry, you can really become of interest, at least as a collaborator to start with. And then by building a network and ties, you can secure also positions in the future. Industry is interested in new targets. If you have activities around target validation, feel free to approach industry. They will really love you for that. If you have some early pharmaceutical drug candidates, of course, also you can just approach industry and they will be very responsive. Industry is in acute need of biomarkers, proof of mechanism, so even demonstrating that a compound hits the right pathway. So if you can develop robust assays, reproducible, and approach companies, again, they will be very interested. Predictive biomarkers, you need to be able to discriminate patients who would respond and not respond to the treatment. Disease models, so if you have unique disease models, it will be a big plus for you. Clinical expertise, so usually clinicians in academia who run clinical development centers of big interest for industry. So all these would help you. So if you have done all that and you come to an interview, so before you come to an interview, you would like to write a job application. Of course, it's very, very individual, but just a few tips. Also the manager, so don't mix competency and experience. So if you come to an interview or you apply for a job, always say what you can do and not what you used to do, because even if you work in a large team, it doesn't ensure that you can do what the large team achieved. So what exactly you did there in that project and how you personally brought it forward. The team and project management skills, you need to demonstrate how you organize your work, how could you plan your own experiments, how could you plan your own projects for several years ahead, how could you secure money, grants, and if you manage collaborations, if you manage teams, even if it were your peer students whom you engaged in your research. So all this will be very important. you need to demonstrate how you train yourself. In industry, training is a very important activity. So you have many courses all the time. So you need to proactively engage. Show networking examples. Demonstrate your flexibility, how you solved issues which were critical, and what was the flexibility demonstrated to do that. Did you travel far away to bring an important reagent? Did you contact a difficult person, and so on. Business orientation, you should demonstrate that you understand how business is organized, and you should demonstrate your will to work in a business environment. And to finish this Tour de France or Tour de Force, where you can find more information. Of course, just talk to people who are in positions, go to job fairs, use LinkedIn, conferences, don't be shy, just speak up, and then of course there is some limited literature, but nothing will replace the personal contact. So with that, I thank you very much. I hope it was of some value, and I'm open to any questions if we have time left.
So first of all, thank you very much, Dr. Kirkin, for this exciting talk. We are now addressing the questions which were submitted during the presentation. And the first question was from a PhD student, and he's working on basic cancer research. His question was, what should I do more to prepare to go to industry successfully after my PhD study, apart from the routine work in the lab?
Yeah. So thank you for the question. I think I addressed parts of that in my last but one slide. So I think what is really important is visibility. So you need to ensure you have a chance to speak at a good level conference, international conference. So if you talk there in this conference in a sovereign way, and you show great analytical skills, not only technical, because technical can be really even bought by industry. So industry needs next generation leaders, people who can recognize new opportunities, organize people around yourself, and drive towards these new opportunities. So number one would be speaking at a conference. Number two would be even these courses I said. So you need to demonstrate that you wanted to understand how industry works. So if there are courses that tell you how drug discovery works, how drug development works, and even if you have to pay your own money for that, just go for it. It's worth investing, because at interviews you will outbid other candidates by really understanding even the language, the slang of the industry, abbreviations, ADME, other things. So all these will put you forward. And probably the third one, just to stop this, it could be a long list. If I didn't have time pressure, I would have probably written down quite a few of them. Last one would be so I said one is networking conferences, second is the courses, and third is this demonstration that you can organize people around you. So basically, you need to take on something where you're a leader, in simple words. So just plan something where you need not only your hands, but 2-3 other pairs of hands, and demonstrate you can organize these things. I think if you bring that together and you show it, it's already a really good start.
Okay, thank you. I can maybe move on to the next question. It came from postdoc with 4 years of postdoc experience, and he asked, what is the right time to initiate an industry career? And he wants to know if he should start now, so after these 4 years of postdoc.
Yeah, it's a great question. Of course, it's highly individual. So in my case, I had 7 years of postdoctoral career before I joined the company. In your case, it's 4 years. I think it's never too early or never too late. Just be prepared that it will be a certain shock, because it's completely different type of activities. And I would So it all depends on the opportunity. If it's really available now, just grab it and go for it, because the younger you are, the more flexible you are. That's the general scheme. You take it from any other areas of life. You need to start it early enough to accommodate yourself. As I said, it can be a shocking experience at least first year. You have to change completely your mindset and change completely. You cannot imagine your working day probably even, because if you come as a postdoc to the lab doing experiments and you plan your own work for the day in academia, if you come to industry, maybe your first activity would be to go and talk to 10 other people and see what the company latest manifesto was, what is the pipeline priority. Maybe your project is deprioritized today and you don't have to even to start your experiments, very possible. So you see, under this umbrella, my recommendation, just go for it if you have an opportunity. If not, just keep working and keep applying and yeah, persevere. I hope I answered you. It's a very difficult question.
So the next question was, how is the flexibility in terms of research projects and work?
Yeah.
And especially, what about the freedom in industry in terms of research work, or how is it to work as a free scientific mind?
Yeah, great question. It depends. So, if you're coming today in the immuno-oncology area and you know that there is a big boom about the PD-L1, PD-1 inhibitors and how to improve immune responses of the own immune response of the body towards the tumor antigens. And if you propose a project for 3-4 years which would supply new targets, I think you'll be flexible enough and you'll get enough money to do that. However, if it's not that kind of hype area, just sometimes it can be flexibility equals 0. So it could be some projects where you're unlucky and you were hired by someone who thought this project would survive another year, but in reality it stopped in 1 year time. It will be deprioritized and you have to stop doing your project, which was your favorite one. So, and then you have absolutely 0 because the money supply to buy your reagents will be stopped, will dwindle. So it's about luck and about your good understanding of the business model of this organization. Before you enter, try to see what drives the current organization, what is the pipeline, what is on the market, which drugs. If this is sustainable, and there is also talk in the interviews, see if people are continuing doing research and how broad that research is required, because sometimes it's only about certain biomarkers. So I would say on the scale of 1 to 10, flexibility in general would be about 3 to 4, and in immuno-oncology it could be about 5, and if you are unlucky it could be 0, so something like that.
Okay, thank you. A very important question I have is, does industrial job selection only work through an inside network, or is it also possible to apply from the outside, so from online, through online application?
Yeah, so to be quick, the first, so internal contacts will decide everything. And you can imagine that today the overproduction of PhD globally is really horrible. So you do have very limited opportunities after 10, 15 years past your PhD everywhere. In academia and even in industry, you don't need so many PhD students. So there's a huge competition. And you can imagine that all these competing people would use the same channels, LinkedIn, conferences. And I experienced a lot of such things when I was in the industrial position, and conference people would come to me and talk to me. But the positions sometimes in industry are just in limited, so a rare commodity. You don't get them because some companies, they don't turn over this stuff for decades. Some are more flexible and open and close research directions often enough. So I think, to be really, really frank, try to find someone you know in industry. That would be the best way, and especially conferences offer that opportunity. So it's the best, really best venue. And the second would be if a company offers like a fair, job fair, go there, talk, and get the contacts and compete, and then just use your unique qualities. Yeah. I hope I could answer a little bit.
Thank you. I think we have time for one last question. It was about how do jobs in industry go together with having a family?
Yeah. So I think that, I used to work in just one company, which was extremely family friendly, and it all depends on the country, on the type of a company, or on the benefits package. I can imagine that in the US would have a completely different environment than in Europe, in Germany or France. So since it's a global webinar, obviously it will be very, very difficult to give just one answer to that. Yeah, family, personally, I have a wife, and my wife, with my wife I have 2 children, and my wife also works for industry, and in our companies it was welcome, and we had many married couples, and people could take maternity leave for even 1 year, and also you have companies where it's not allowed. I would say that nowadays companies compete for titles of best employers, benefits are improved. So I would imagine it should not stop you, and academia sometimes is as difficult for family life as industry. So any high-intensity career would be difficult, especially for women, unfortunately. But organizations, as you know, are aware of that, and there are many programs to increase women in leadership roles and so on and so forth. So if you're perseverant and strong and healthy, you will manage that, and don't be inhibited by this kind of thought. And I would say that if choosing between academia and industry and family balance, probably industry would be even better. Yeah. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So with this, I would close the Q&A session, and I want to thank Dr. Kirkin again for answering our questions. If you have additional questions, please contact Dr. Kirkin directly. I'm sure he's happy to answer to more questions.
I'll do my best.
Thank you, Dr. Kirkin. And I have one announcement at the end. I would like to bring your attention to upcoming Nature Jobs Career Expo events in London, UK, and Düsseldorf, Germany. Both events are free of charge and a perfect opportunity to meet employers face-to-face, network, and also learn how to enhance your employability. And with this, I would like to close today's webinar. Dr. Kirkin, thank you again for your exciting talk, and also thank you all for your attendance on today's webinar. We hope you found the webinar helpful for your future career decisions. And if you are interested in the Metastatic.Research Society news and updates, don't forget to follow us on social media. And please also don't forget to check out our website, Metastasis.Research.org. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Goodbye.